Okay, let's dive into this really fascinating story. It's about a celestial message that, according to some, has been unfolding across the sky for nearly a decade. This isn't a message written in a book, but in the sun, moon, and stars. And it's built around one single mysterious number. Everything seems to be pointing toward this one future date, March 3rd, 2026. On that day, there's going to be a total lunar eclipse, a blood moon. Now, those who follow this theory say this won't be just any eclipse. They believe it's stamped over and over again with a very specific numerical sign.
And this is where it starts to get kind of wild. Look at this cluster of, well, are they coincidences? The eclipse itself belongs to Saros cycle 133. It'll be visible over Oregon, which is, you guessed it, the 33rd state. At its peak, it's supposed to be 33 degrees above the horizon at exactly 3:33 a.m. And if that's not enough, believers even connect this to the Bible, pointing out that the story of the Exodus kicks off in Numbers chapter 33, verse 3. That same number is seemingly everywhere: the date, the time, the location, even the scripture.
Now, to really understand this perspective, you have to go back to the book of Genesis. The idea here is that the sun and moon aren't just big rocks floating in space. Genesis says they were put there to be for signs. So if you follow that logic, maybe we're supposed to be reading the sky not just with telescopes, but as a kind of symbolic language.
But here's the thing. That 2026 blood moon, it's not the start of the story. Not even close. It's actually the second part of a celestial message that began 9 years earlier with an event that millions of us actually saw for ourselves.
Remember the Great American Eclipse back on August 21st, 2017? Well, proponents of this theory say its path was no accident. Think about it. It entered the United States over Oregon, the 33rd state. And where did it exit? Over South Carolina, right along the 33rd parallel. It's like the event was bookended, signed on both ends with the number 33.
And if that wasn't strange enough, get this. The geography is just wow. Right at its entry point in Oregon, the eclipse's path crossed over Fano Peak, which sits at an elevation of 3,333 feet. Then, as it left the country, its path went over Cold Branch Mountain in South Carolina. And its elevation? The exact same, 3,333 feet. Same number, same elevation, at the very beginning and the very end of its coast-to-coast journey.
Okay, so the eclipse itself was full of these 33s. But the story doesn't end there, not by a long shot. Something else, something huge in biblical prophecy, is said to have happened exactly 33 days after that solar eclipse.
On September 23, 2017, a date that also happened to be the Feast of Trumpets, a planetary alignment appeared in the sky that was so rare, many say it had never happened before in known history. Believers argue it was a perfect match for the great sign described in the book of Revelation. And it happened, you guessed it, precisely 33 days after the eclipse, linking it all together.
So you're probably asking, okay, what is the big deal with the number 33? I mean, why that number? Why is it considered so important, like some kind of divine signature? Well, understanding that is the key to this whole thing.
It all comes down to this one simple but incredibly powerful idea. 33 is the number of years Jesus is believed to have lived on earth. It's the full length of his life, his ministry, his crucifixion, and his resurrection. So in this view, the number 33 isn't just a number, it's a signature. It's seen as the author signing his own biography across the canvas of the sky. And this is where it really seems to click into place for believers. They point to this specific verse from the prophet Joel, which lays out a very clear two-part celestial sequence. First, the sun goes dark. Then, the moon turns to blood. It's presented in that exact order.
So you see how it fits together? It's interpreted as a two-part prophecy unfolding right before our eyes. Part 1, 2017, the sun turned to darkness over America in an event signed with the number 33. Part 2, 9 years later in 2026, the moon will turn to blood over that same part of the world, an event also apparently signed with the number 33. It's seen as one complete 9-year-long message.
Now, this brings up a really good question. One you might be thinking right now. If these are signs fulfilling ancient biblical prophecy, why are they happening over America? Why Oregon, of all places?
Right? It's a totally fair question. Prophecy was written to Israel, so you'd think the signs would be over Jerusalem, but there's a fascinating line of reasoning for why the address for these signs appears to be the U.S. West Coast.
The thinking goes like this. Divine signs tend to appear over the sky of the dominant world power of that era. The center of global influence has been moving westward for centuries. from Rome to Europe and, well, now to America. The parallel they draw is with the first Exodus. The plagues didn't happen in the Promised Land. They happened in Egypt, the superpower of the day. So, following that logic, the current address for a message of this magnitude would be the United States.
All right, let's get to the final piece of this puzzle. And honestly, this might be the most powerful part of the entire 9-year message. What happens after that second sign, the 2026 blood moon?
You guessed it. The number 33 shows up one last time. If you add 33 days to the date of that blood moon, you land on a day with absolutely immense spiritual meaning.
So March 3rd plus 33 days, that lands us on April 5th, 2026. For millions of people, that's Easter Sunday, the celebration of the resurrection. But get this, on the Hebrew calendar, that date falls smack in the middle of Passover week, the festival that commemorates the original Exodus from Egypt. It's a perfect convergence.
This 33-day period, from the blood moon to this convergence of Easter and Passover, is seen as a modern echo of the Israelites' journey. Remember, they left Egypt free, but just a few weeks later they were completely trapped. Pharaoh's army was behind them, and the massive Red Sea was in front of them. There was no way out.
Can you imagine? From their point of view, it was over. It was a total failure. They yelled at Moses, absolutely convinced that God had led them into a trap, that the promise of a new life was just a cruel joke. As far as they could see, their story was about to have a very tragic ending.
But that's the thing, isn't it? The very moment that looked like the end of the road was actually the setup for their greatest miracle. They were standing at the edge of impossibility, totally hopeless. But their ultimate deliverance was literally just one night away.
And that leaves us with this final, powerful question that this whole 9-year celestial story seems to be asking. What if, facing an impossible situation, being trapped at the water's edge with no way forward, isn't a sign that you failed? What if, instead, it's the perfect position for a miracle to happen? It's a pretty profound thought to chew on at the heart of this whole 33 enigma.